Curtains have opened up the auditorium to usher the performance of Pablo. Spotlight shines overhead. Director raises their thumb. If everybody's comfortable, I'd like to welcome you to the show. Thank you for waiting. Tune hour and wide. Feast your imagination on what you find. What will you find? Paz Babylon.
Paz Babylon.
Paz
Labias and genitals, welcome to the podcast. I've missed you all and I am glad to be back. I should explain my absence because it really wasn't planned. I'll try and keep it brief. I know nobody's concerned with the wizard's plight and you're eager for me to get on with the show, but I do feel it's probably wise to update y'all because I'm sure you'll be confused and I want to alleviate some fears. I did say in the last episode that it would be easier to put out the pod every couple of weeks instead of each week, for example. But I want to say that isn't happening. I know it may seem like that's the direction it's going right now, but I like it being a weekly thing. It's a nice challenge, keeps the creative juices flowing. It basically all just comes down to this being a transitional period for the pod. Future historians will refer to this period as the trans era. That's what these last few episodes have been because I've not been able to record as much as I'd like to. So my own schedule's changed and the elves' schedules have changed. So we're just in the process of trying to realign them. Then, of course, all the drama I had with Kakanax. And anyway, after I decided to rearrange our schedule and then left the clasp of Kakanax, I got so fucking sick. And look, I don't want to alarm anyone. But we might need to shut down the entire world. I had one too many bat soups. I fucked a pangolin, whatever that is. Honestly, I tried to record and my voice was just completely fucked. I couldn't do anything. And, just imagine Sean Dyche if he'd been throw-pied by a barbed penis. So that's the reason. Nothing too glamorous. And we are still in the midst of transitioning, so I imagine there may be a couple of weeks between this episode and the next one, and there'll probably be a couple of weeks break after that because I have some travels coming up, and we are a ghetto podcast, as I often say. So we'll need to use a couple of weeks to upgrade the podcast in some ways because it will just all take time, and our time's limited. At least until the Rothschild money comes in. So that break to upgrade some stuff will probably happen every season or so when the leaves transitional. So that's how much of a trans advocate I am. Following the seasons. But after that, we should be back to normal and posting every week again, every Wednesday. But also, there's something you should know about me. What I call Wednesday is longer than other people's. So it will be every Wednesday, but that might be Thursday or Friday for y'all. That's what you might call it. You see, I don't do things by the book. Because I know we live in a goldfish culture where people value quantity over quality and people just shit out content for the sake of appeasing algorithms. But I'm honestly fucking just done with the algorithm. As I said before, there's been a few episodes where I'd make it in on the buzzer just about get it out on time, and then not really be able to do the edits that I wanted to do, and it's just like, why? Why am I like, I may as well just wait an extra day or two, however long it takes, and just do it properly. The algorithm can suck my dick. I couldn't care less. But as long as y'all know that that's the case, then I don't think it really matters. I think that's really the important thing. And I didn't want to start the pod in this way, but I just felt it was necessary after such a long absence, which again I never anticipated myself, and also with the upcoming breaks too. Because if I didn't say anything, you would probably be confused and wonder, is there something going on with the pod, or have I lost motivation or whatever? But I just want to let you know that I'm not the kind of girl who gives up just like that. Oh, fuck my ass. And so, with this being another transition episode in our trans era, I thought it'd be a good time to do a trans episode ourselves. Now, I did plan on using the intro of the podcast to tell you of some historical cases of transgenderism, because contrary to popular belief, it is a pretty universal thing. It's been documented in many societies throughout history. But when I got onto Elagabalus, who was a Roman emperor, that Cassius Dio said delighted in being called mistress, wife, and queen, and reportedly wore makeup and wigs, preferred to be called a lady and not a lord, and supposedly offered vast sums to any physician who could provide him with a vagina. I immediately just went down a massive fucking rabbit hole of his religious cult, which led me on to the Scythian Galley priests that would castrate themselves, which led me on to the Galileans of the Bible, and passages of Jesus talking about eunuchs, and then from there I got on to Scots, descending from Queen Scota of Egypt, and the Stone of Destiny. It's the internet. So I didn't manage to do what I intended to do, basically. But the point still remains. There have been trans people all throughout history, and I myself have actually interacted with hundreds of trans people in my life. So I would say I've done my fair share of field research on the matter, and we'll get into that in this episode. But please do keep in mind that everything you're about to hear may well just be the ramblings of a man. As you all know, this is a ghetto podcast, and I'm an abstemious fellow. I'm sure you've heard of Marco Polo. Well, once upon a time, I was Narco Rolo. I had about £150 and decided to travel to Southeast Asia for 3 months, which I think should go down in travel folklore, to be honest. And I'd stay with random birds and sugar mamas and temples, whatever else. Just hop from place to place, boudoir to boudoir. Not my proudest era in my life, to have no financial independence as a man. But I feel I was forced into a vagrant lifestyle by the anti-art society we inhabit. And really, I actually couldn't give a fuck. I was impoverished, unemployable, so I could have chose to do far worse things with my life than choose to have a bit of fucking fun in the Orient. And that's ghetto travel for you, so it is what it is. But this meant that I wasn't the pickiest of plebeians when choosing my accommodation, which led to some sticky situations here and there. And so when I was coming back into Thailand from Cambodia, I ended up staying with a ladyboy. My original plan was to do a much more extensive tour of the region, but with the lack of funds, it was a quick trip to Cambodia, and then a very swift return back into Thailand. So as I was arriving back into a border town called Aranya Prathet, I think, from Poipet. And I was planning on taking a bus from there to a place called Ubon Ratchathani, Isan province, and from there I was going to go back to Chiang Mai and then return to Bangkok, where I'd been in my first month in the country. Perhaps I'll go into more detail about my travels in another episode, but I just want to give you a swift idea of my itinerary and where I'd been. And so when I was in Bangkok, I was introduced to a ladyboy that was a mutual friend of someone I knew out there. And they said to me that when I re-enter Thailand from Cambodia, I should stay with them in Khon Kaen. They were a student there, because the bus I need to get from the border town takes me there anyway, and then I can get the bus from there to my next destination, Ubon Ratchathani, because it's in the same province. And it said they'd pay for my bus also. I don't need to worry about food, that I could wash my clothes there, use the internet. So this all sounded tremendous to me, very hospitable. So I agreed. This is fucking bogan travel for you. And so yeah, I was supposed to just stay over for one night, but then, I got stabbed. I got fucking stabbed. I honestly don't want to go into too much detail, as there's a lot to go through this episode. I'm sure I'll elaborate it deeper on in an episode in the future too. But basically, I was out alone surveying the area in the nightlife. I was watching a band in a bar or something, and I got talking to a waitress. We were deliberating about going to a nightclub in the city centre after the bar closed and a shift finished. And then two other gentlemen called me over to the table and insisted that I had some drinks with them, but they couldn't really speak much English, and they looked like an Asian version of Dumb and Dumber, just these militaristic bowl cuts. Anyway, the waitress opted not to go to the nightclub, as she had to head back to her hometown early on the morrow. So I said, yeah, that's fine, no problem. We exchanged numbers, and I just left. But then as I was walking back home, I heard, "Quick, we're going to the nightclub, jump on." It was Dumb and Dumber, and they were in the middle of traffic, so all the cars behind them were beeping as they waited for me. So I didn't have a lot of time to think, and they were just going, "Come on, come on, come on." So I thought, fuck it, and I got on the back of one of the motorbikes, which I immediately regretted, to be honest, because I was thinking that I actually couldn't even be arsed going, but it's too late. And the thing you should know about Khon Kaen is that it's a fucking shithole. So we had to drive along what was a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, and then at the very top, curving into the distance, was the city centre. And as we were driving up it, the motorbike I was on the back of just stopped, and the guy on the other motorbike kept riding up the dirt road into the city centre in the distance. And I said to Jim Carrey, "What's going on?" And he said, there's just something up with his motorbike, and so his friend on the other one is just going to get some help. But he wouldn't look at me in the eye. He was very suspicious, I didn't fucking trust him for a minute, but also there's nothing I could do. Then about 5 minutes later, the guy on the other motorbike came speeding back down the dirt road from the city centre, along with another guy on a motorbike that I'd never met before. And as soon as they arrived, he got off and shouted, "White bastard!" and swung at me with a machete. I ducked down and he sliced the top of my head. I'm just in shock, screaming, what the fuck? And these inbreds were all just laughing at me. And so I started fighting with them. And I don't know if you've noticed this before, but there are a lot of places in the world that lack honour when it comes to fighting. Where I'm from, if you don't fight one-on-one, you're a shitbag. It isn't even considered a fight anymore. If it was a fight, you've now lost it just for being such a rat pussy. But this is a view that isn't often shared outside of Europe, I've noticed, and that's what I realised here too through my lived experience. And I'm not even going to attempt to be braggadocious here. I'm an absolute pussy, but honestly, if this was a straightener, I would pretty easily fuck any one of them up. They were scrawny and about 5'2". To be honest, it was pretty emasculating in the aftermath for that reason alone. Anyway, one of them would try and fight me, so I'd start defending myself and just immediately get the upper hand. And then the others would start jumping in. One of them had the knife, and another had a pole or a crowbar or some shit. And I'm just far too much of a gentleman to be attacked, because my mind just starts going, I say, these boys don't abide by the Queensberry rules. I don't quite know what to do about it. So anyway, we were scrapping for a bit, and I don't really remember what happened. I lost so much fucking blood. But somehow I managed to make it into the city centre, and this is in the early hours of the morning. I don't know how bad any of my injuries were, and I was just completely covered in blood. That's all I knew, and I was just trying to stop cars that were passing by, just waving and banging on the windows, but they'd all just drive past me because I probably just looked like I was a lunatic murderer on the loose. Or a pussy riot protester. I don't remember if I met a guy that stopped in the end and called an ambulance. Or if I passed out and was picked up by an ambulance. My memory is super vague on the whole thing, as I said, but I got taken to a hospital, and I swear down the first thing they did was pull down my pants, put some lube on the finger, and stick it up my ass. I turned to him and said, "Hey, you do know the problems with my head?" There's a bit of speculation as to why this might have happened when I spoke to people afterwards. Some people think that it was to increase the medical costs because the more tests they do, the higher the medical bill would be. And some people said it was a rape test, to check that I hadn't been raped. It's like, well, I hadn't until your finger infiltrated my asshole, squire. And they did a bunch of other tests on me, put me in an MRI thing, stitched my head up. At one point, a nurse came over to me and she started showing me some fucked up gore on her phone. Just a crazy bloody mess. I was very hazy, and I was thinking, who's this crazy bitch? Surely she's breaching doctor-patient confidentiality by showing me these pics. And she goes, "It's your ear." And my ear was just hanging off and completely covered in blood. I was like, "Oh," and she went, "Would you like us to put it back on for you?" I said, "Yes, that would be most preferable." And so anyway, long story short, what should have been a one-night OSJ now turned into 2 weeks, because they said I shouldn't go anywhere for 2 weeks and just recover until I get my stitches taken out, which actually ended up being done faulty. So when I did go to get them taken out in another city, spoiler alert, I didn't stay the 2 weeks. They had to redo them. And then I got a gilf to remove them with some scissors in a 7-Eleven in Chiang Mai. All stories for another time, but I was basically fine. I was out to the hospital after a day or so. I should also say that I completely forgive the people that attacked me. Racism is retarded. And if I'm forced to speculate on what their motives were, I could only conclude that they were at least in part racially motivated. I had money on me and they never attempted to steal my money. They just kept shouting white bastards at me, which, of course I am. Of course I don't know who told them. I mean, the white part was evidence, but don't know what intel they had on the bastard part. But yeah, both true. And I'm not a middle class queg. I've told you all before, and I'm sure I'll tell you 1,000 times again. The globalists that dominate the media, that have subverted our universities and schools at this point, that have control over all of our major institutions of power, and that puppeteer the politicians of all parties, are fundamentally anti-white. This is a fact that people are going to have to accept sooner or later. And sooner or later, people will have to question where this ideology came from in its first instance and why they possess it in the first place. And I grew up in a ghetto and was jumped for the colour of my skin there too, as were many of the white kids I knew growing up. And this has been going on for a couple of generations now, despite the cooked police refusing to help or the globalist media refusing to air any of it. I could show you videos of white people being attacked frivolously by minorities purely for the colour of their skin. Men, women, children being attacked by men, women being attacked by men, elderly people being attacked for having white skin, disabled people being attacked for having white skin. I could show you footage of this for hours. I could show you footage of these anti-white racist attacks 24/7 every day for a whole year. However, if I were to show you any of them, I'd also get my channel shut down because because the globalists that run YouTube have determined that by me showing you clips of white people being attacked, that would by itself be considered as incitement to violence against minorities doing the violence. And so the myth that only white people can be racist can continue to be perpetuated. And that the biggest threat to the world is white supremacy, which is a crucial part of of subverting our nation's democracies and justifying their tyrannical policies. Every working class person in the country is well aware that this is the situation. Only upper and middle class people aren't aware, and most women, because they're all sheltered from the reality of their policies. Anyway, I tell you this because I am aware of the situation, and I still think racism is retarded. You must be able to forgive. And I'm not saying to put your head in the sand, deny the reality of the situation, or allow yourself to be a punching bag. Absolutely not. But most racism breeds retaliatory racism. And so it's a never-ending cycle if at some point you don't break the cycle through forgiveness. And you just need to understand that everything happens for a reason. Like Thailand is another vaginal castrated country, riddled with issues. I've said before, people say it's the land of smiles. It's the land of crocodile smiles. Countries full of prostitutes or de facto prostitutes. Corruption, juntas. I mean. Yeah, we'll get into it more another time. But I'm not an atheist. I don't believe that something comes from nothing, and so those people are just a product of their environment. They don't understand how their situation came to be, who's responsible, how to fix it. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. But also, I don't know if you've ever been stabbed before, but it's weird because even after you forgive, your body will still retain the trauma of the event. Like even after you've forgiven him in your mind. I'm not gonna lie, it did fuck me up for a good few years. I did acquire a phobia of the moon. Every time the moon came out, I started getting a panic attack, like some wily werewolf, because it happened at night, you see. And I don't know if any of you suffer from arachnophobia. I used to be scared of spiders a lot when I was a kid, and if I saw one in a room, I wouldn't go near that room for a couple of days because it was like the fearful energy of seeing them would linger in the room. Even if it was dead now, the room was bad luck. It was cursed, and so I'd avoid it. And this was kind of the same thing, except the room was the earth. Because I think, that's where that happened, so I don't want to go there again. I don't want to go back to Earth. That's a dangerous place. So anyway, I now had to stay with the tranny for a couple of weeks, and I'll get straight to answering the question that's on all your filthy minds, because I know you're all thinking it, and no, I didn't fuck them. We didn't do anything sexual whatsoever, actually. And I've already said before that I've got nothing against it philosophically. I was certainly a promiscuous youth, and all preferences can go out the window when the moon does come out, when a sex addict needs the fix. But I don't know how to explain this. The cranium was just unmistakably male. So it doesn't matter how much mascara you put on a moai. I'm not going to book a flight to Easter Island, you know what I mean? She just had a fucking meathead, this Cro-Magnon cranium, and I felt bad actually, because that's one of the first observations I made. She'd spent thousands of pounds on these big fake tits, and had all the makeup you could ever imagine. Must have spent hundreds of pounds on that too. But that head was going nowhere. Nobody was ever going to be convinced. Not unless you're a Kenyan man with the middle name Hussein. She did touch my dick, actually. She did touch my dick. I always forgot about that. Had the pleasure of holding it while I took a piss into a bowl. because when I was in the hospital, I couldn't move one arm. It was completely bruised from my wrist to my shoulder. And as I said, the whole event is quite hazy, and I don't remember why. I have a faint memory of it being trapped under something and them trying to run me over, but also nothing was broken, so I have no fucking idea. Anyway, I couldn't move that arm, and then my other arm was attached to a heart monitor thing, so they had to take my cock out when I needed to piss and hold it for me. I just spent the entire time trying not to make eye contact. She was just looking at it entranced, started biting her lip as she gave it a final shake into the bedpan. So that's about as sexual as it got. I should say that it became apparent after a few days that they were definitely hoping they'd be able to fuck my ass. I mean, I want it to be known also that I'm really not a fan of ingrates. That's a true pet peeve of mine, so I'm thankful for the hospitality, truly, but also she was just hoping to sink her fangs into some phalanx. That motive was clear, and again, she didn't expect this guava to nearly become a cadaver, so I'm appreciative of the help, but also they absolutely dreamt about bumming me, which I didn't anticipate in my youthful naivety. I truly thought they were just a good Samaritan, and I wasn't into it, the whole cranium situation, so by the end of it, they started to resent that fact, and I just thought it was better to depart prematurely, and I didn't fucking speak to them after I left, but yeah, I do hope they're well. Anyway, as I was now bedbound, and being Attenborough's natural heir, I thought I'd use this experience wisely and just observe them in their natural habitat. Get to the bottom of what all the shit is about, because as much as you hear about trans people in the media, unless you live in a super liberal city, you're not ever likely to come into contact with one in person, and if you are, your time's pretty limited in your interaction. It's pretty rare that a member of the public is granted such access. An independent inquiry into the claims the media and so-called scientists have presented to us. So this is how I viewed it. I thought I'm just going to get to the bottom of what all this is about. And at this time, mainstream media was just beginning to embrace trans. But it was also probably at the peak of its militancy. You know, Caitlyn Jenner was Woman of the Year. Caitlyn Jenner, or as I like to call her, Kim. Oh, fuck. I had my lack of professionalism is is coming to the fore. Ah, shit. I was doing so well. Okay. Caitlyn Jenner, or as I like to call her, Kim Car. Kim. Oh, this is not going to be worth every single time I fucked up on the pod and break into laughter. It's never worth it. Is never worth it. It'll lower your expectations significantly, please. Fuck. Okay. Caitlyn Jenner, or as I like to call her, Kim Kardashian. You know, because they killed a cunt. They fucking ran over a cunt. Buckle up, buckaroos. You know, we'll get through it. So that was all around this time. Anyway, where you were told not only must you accept that this man is now a woman, if you don't, you're somehow evil. And not only are they a woman, they're automatically the best woman on the planet. Remember that? Anyone remember? Well, yeah, I was never convinced by it, but I thought I'd just go into this with an open mind and just observe without any prejudice, and ultimately determine if they were, in fact, a woman trapped in a man's body or whatever else had been claimed, and also how they may have came to be. I have a memory of my first full day. I remember I was walking around with a hole in my head like a fucking sugar babe, taking joy in horrifying passers-by, and I became aware of bottled boisterousness for the first time. This would be an observation that would recur throughout my stay, and it put me in quite the conundrum, because I don't know if you're the comedic type in your life, but I'm quite the cheeky chappy, and well, the girliest of girls will often respond to some joking with a light, playful punch, and society gives them complete license to do this. No one's harmed, and no one bats an eye. It's completely fine. A man says something cheeky, and a woman, usually the girliest of girls, will respond with a bashful retort. Now, we were chilling in a place. I made a joke, and this specimen decided, as the girliest of girls, they'd also respond in this way. And I got a fucking dead leg. And I just remember thinking, is anyone gonna flinch if I drop this clown? You know, what's the etiquette in this situation? Am I expected to just take physical abuse in the name of progressivism now? But also, if I gave a dead leg back, is society going to jump up in outrage? You know, it seems nobody in society is talking about how, out of common sense and courteousness, over the ages, women have been granted particular privileges in society on account of them being petite. And that maybe it doesn't make any sense if those same privileges are transferred to those that are less petite. And as I say, I refer to this behaviour as bottled boisterousness, and that's what it was. And look, I'm not going to even tease you about it. I concluded pretty swiftly that they weren't a woman. Like, it really didn't take a long time to conclude this, to be honest. But this is one of the key reasons they're bottled boisterousness, because I'd been sleeping in a shack on a beach in Cambodia a couple of weeks earlier, and I remember looking at some puppies fighting with each other, and it reminded me of my own upbringing with my brothers. And I was pondering about how maybe this is a part of male bonding as the animals we are. But you see, if you've been living your entire life presenting as a girl, it isn't deemed feminine to behave in the boisterous manner that we would growing up, giving each other dead legs and wrestling and things like that. So you could see that they were always eager to express that violent part of themselves they weren't able to do as a child. But when they'd attempt to, they'd have to check themselves, because they'd remember it isn't feminine behaviour, so it seemed that insecurity underpinned all of their actions, to the point where I actually think that actual women are freer to behave in these stereotypically masculine or boisterous ways far more than trannies, because they don't have this fear. You could powerbomb your niece or your sister, and they'd be more than happy to jump up and fight back laughing. They won't ever be encumbered by the thought of, I'm not a girl if I do this, because they're a girl no matter what they do. It's something that's a biological reality, not a behaviour. And so this is the first reason they're not a woman. The biological fact that they're a male. You know, it doesn't matter how many masculine or feminine qualities someone has, they're not immune from the realities of their body. This was one of the major revelations in my life I had about the differences between men and women. The reality of PMS. I've talked about this on the pod before. After having been told my entire life there's absolutely no possible difference between men and women, that the only people who could ever think so are just evil, bigoted misogynists, I finally became an adult and had relationships with women, and discovered that PMS absolutely affects all women. a menstrual cycle of a woman will absolutely influence her thoughts and behaviour, whereas my menstrual cycle doesn't affect my thoughts or behaviour because I don't have a menstrual cycle. So that's a very clear biological difference between men and women. And there's many other differences, obviously, but that was just a starting point. And it was pertinent here because it meant that my trans friend could also not exhibit PMS like a woman, as they also don't have a menstrual cycle. But there's an idea that the reality of biological sex by itself isn't an obstacle to being a man or woman because of the concept of gender. You know, even if the biological realities exist, which they deny, it doesn't matter because most of what shapes men into men and women into women is nothing more than a socially constructed, all these socially constructed behaviours of ours. But actually, although there can be a small amount of social influence on gender, and there are different levels of archetypal masculine and feminine qualities within us all, the way our biology shapes us into what we are as men and women can't be understated. Because it isn't just the biological reality of us being men or women. It's how key moments in our lives are linked to our biology also shape us. Like girls getting their first period, the embarrassing situations, the fear of other girls getting theirs first, having irregular cycles, getting breasts for the first time, buying your first bras, talking with your friends about it, the same vaginal comparisons, and of course the ultimate, being pregnant, having children, breastfeeding, along with all the other social activities growing up, dance classes, sleepovers, sports teams, makeup sessions. Of course it is possible to throw a little trans boy into any of those scenarios, but does any woman seriously think at any point they'd be treated as one of the girls? No. Of course not, and their biology would preclude them from participating in some of those things entirely. But it's the same for men and boys. We used to play a game when I was a kid called the fighting game. Do you want to know what that was? Well, we would get into two groups of 5, and then we would fight. that was the fighting game. And we had another game called ball popping, when we were like year 7 or year 8, where we would just punch each other in the balls while shouting "ball pop." And think of elaborate ways of doing it. Like one of us would steal someone's bag and then throw it high into the air so they'd lift both their arms up to catch it. And then someone else would just duck behind them and go, "ball pop!" And just uppercut their bollocks. So you could also throw a biological girl into that scenario, dress them like a boy, give them puberty blockers, whatever. Do you think they're ever going to be able to participate? No. Because if you attempted to play, you'd just be bewildered as to why Jerry's reacting with such nonchalance to all your ball popping, and then return home with a bruised labia. And in reality, you'd know it was a girl, and so you'd never ask them to play. And any games you did play, you'd alter your behaviour because you'd know it isn't one of the lads. So they can only ever end up being incredibly effeminate men or incredibly masculine women. Those small, stupid games we played as boys and girls truly play a part in making us into men and women. Fuck, do you know how many years we spent talking about wanking in school? That's another one coming. The ejaculation of sperm out of our penises into all manner of things. Through all manner of methods and all the ensuing philosophy and debate around this. These are the things that shape male culture. No man or woman lives with the same fears and insecurities that shape a trans person's identity. That no woman has the fear of being killed or beat up upon discovering her penis. No man or woman is ever worried about being misgendered. There's no insecurity whatsoever about whether what we're doing makes us a man or a woman, because we know with certainty. There's no fear of if we pass. and we couldn't give a shit about what pronouns are used. So it is impossible for a man to ever become a woman, or for a woman to become a man. So what the fuck's going on here? Well, I've had hundreds of other interactions since that one, and it becomes a hard thing to categorise as to what is trans and what isn't, and there's honestly not even a true consensus in their own so-called community, because some will tell you straight up that they're not women. Some will consider themselves a third gender altogether, and others will insist that they're absolutely women. And then those will usually regard the other two with disdain and say that they're not transgender, but are just transvestites. But the only way to tell them apart would be by the amount of hormones they take and surgeries they have. But then you can have one that tells you they're not a woman and has taken hormones and had surgeries, and another that tells you that they're absolutely a woman, but has no money to pay for the hormones or any surgery whatsoever. So they're just ostensibly a transvestite. Some want to keep their penis, others despise it. It's all very complicated, so I think society at large has no other choice but to lump them together by their commonality, which is that they all wear makeup and cross-dress. But it would appear what we call dysmorphia, the belief that they're in a different body, should probably be viewed as something on a spectrum across all of them, rather than something they all have to the utmost degree. And so, as I said, there's 1,000 ways to become 1,000 things, but there are a few patterns that I observed. So these are some of the most likely ways I've observed these people coming to be. For some of them, they were made to wear women's clothes as children. Bizarre, I know, but you can look into it, and it is a common fact. They'll have a weird grandmother that put them in dresses, or a single mother that wanted to have a girl and resents that they're a boy, so decides to just cross-dress them. Another uncommon route is autogynephilia, which is something you'll hear bandied about a lot by female feminists, the so-called TERFs. That is, and this is the idea that it's sexually motivated. It's just men that are aroused by dressing up in women's clothes, which I don't think accounts for a huge amount of trans people, but it was worth pointing out that it does exist, and they certainly do account for a percentage of them. And I don't know if this will be the same as that, or a little different, but I once spoke to a tranny whose transition began after they started watching sissy hypno porn. I don't know if you've ever seen sissy hypno before. As you know, I'm a big fan of Siderin. Some people say this podcast is Paul McKenna meets Terence McKenna. Love Jerry Sadowitz, Banana Splits, so I'm partial to some hypnosis. Anyway, I'm also a journalist, Dewey LaRue, BBC whistleblower. I see things so you don't have to. It's basically what's known as a compilation in the Kuma world. So it's just highlights of the most depraved she-male porn from around the internet, supercut into one 5-minute video with subliminal messages flashing on the screen throughout. Well, I say subliminal, overt messages of abuse and commands for sissification. All good storytellers understand the importance of pacing, though, so it usually begins slowly with a blowjob montage, while an ethereal narrator denigrates them and encourages the feminization.
You're pathetic. Why don't you wear a dress?
And then the ASMR affirmations kick in.
You will look so good in the dress.
Then, as the video climaxes, scenes of the most extreme gangbangs are interspersed with some choreographed dancing, providing a surreal juxtaposition to the multiple penetrations and anal prolapses on screen, while Rihanna serves as the score throughout. My bones, but chains and whips excite me. Na na na, come on, I like it, come on, I like it, come on, I like it, come on. Dad?
Michael, what the fuck are you watching? What's this? Sissy hypno? Get that fucking wig off your head. And what's that written on your forehead? Come, pig. What does that mean?
It means nothing.
Wipe that shit off your face. You've got to come to the building site with me tomorrow.
I can't. It's permanent.
What do you mean it's permanent?
I used a Sharpie.
Oh, you're having a laugh. What's that you put in your ass?
Me links.
Your links. Your nan got you that for Christmas. It's supposed to go under your arms, not in your ass. I don't know what's wrong with you. Writing on yourself, wearing your sister's dress, toothpaste round your mouth. Wait till your mother gets back, we'll see what she has to say about this. In fact, here comes your mother now. Have you seen what your son's been doing?
Leave him alone, Stephen. He's just going through some growing pains and I'm sure he'll grow out of it eventually.
Better fucking that do. Right, you can wear your granddad's beekeeping helmet, and if I ever catch you watching that shit again, there'll be murder. I want to see you on the building site at 9 o'clock tomorrow, and I've told all me mates you like footy.
But I don't want to be a builder. I want to be a drag queen. So that's sissy hypno. But I think the most common reason behind someone becoming trans is sexual abuse. Because you can research for yourselves the common symptoms of sexual abuse in people and see that there's a very clear overlap in a lot of their behaviour. And there's also the experience of leaving the body as a coping mechanism to deal with the trauma. This is why there's a strong link between sexual abuse and dissociative identity disorder, split personalities. Because at one time, they left their body, so to say, to deal with the trauma of abuse and re-entered as different people. And so I suspected this is what's happened with a lot of trans people at an age before the memories formed. I mean, as a whole, abuse tends to have this effect of either feminising men or masculinising women anyway. You know, if you talk to a woman that's being abused, she tends to even have a deeper voice and more aggression than a woman who hasn't. But for the abuse to be responsible for making them full-on trans, I think it makes sense to have happened at an early age before the memories formed, because what you'll often find is a sincere belief in the dysmorphia. And this is also the least palatable for society to embrace, and also the most popular kind pushed by the media also. That they're absolutely women and have always known. Hashtag born this way. Lady Gaga. Woo! But you see, a problem arises with this because that's a claim of supernatural abilities to be able to remember how they felt when they were born. Nobody else can remember being younger than 4, but all of a sudden a trans person says, I've always been this way, and you're supposed to just believe that. No, you've felt that way for as long as you remember, which is around the age of 4. And as we know, sexual abuse will feminize them. We know there's a good chance they'll leave their body and return with new identities. We know in adulthood they'll be more prone to depression and promiscuity. It really makes sense to me. And another element that I observed that ties into this is that I observed that they weren't just trying to imitate a woman. It wasn't just a bad imitation of a woman. It was a childlike imitation of a woman. It was how a little boy would imitate a woman. You know, if I was going to imitate a woman, it would actually be a far better impression, which highlights another reality of life, which is now being cordoned off into an area deemed taboo. But actually, heterosexual men know more about women and the nature of women than anyone else on the planet. Because they only present the facade of themselves to society at large. It's all superficial. You know, this is why bitchiness is a thing, because they all want to present themselves as being a particular way, and then are another way behind the back. As much as women may whine and moan about such statements and feign this kind of feminine solidarity together, or say that men should never even speak on any matter pertaining to any woman ever, a woman has only ever shown her true self to her male partner, and that's the truth. There are parts of her that she's shown to nobody but her male partner. Part of her which she may have not known even existed until she was with them. And actually every woman I've said that to in my life has agreed, because it's the truth. So to an observant heterosexual man, the image we would create of women would be quite layered and full of nuance, which a tranny completely lacks, because they don't have any of those experiences. All they can produce is a childlike imitation of a woman. That's why it'll always come across as a goofy caricature. I'm a woman because I wear dresses and put makeup on. And then they'll like skip around or something. It's all incredibly superficial, but more importantly, childlike. You know, this is how I would have viewed women when I was a little boy. And the woman they think they are has been with them since they were a little boy. That's what they're presenting, a woman through the eyes of the age they were when they were abused. But on the superficiality aspect, this is certainly a vaginal thing. I mean, the whole thing is ultimately vaginal. In fact, I want to get into what it's all about and what's the significance of any of it, but I should first talk about the vaginal mind. And actually before that, I should say that I think it's immoral to view trannies as some kind of evil scourge, as some do. I mean, even though I don't think anyone's born that way, the entire principle of that phrase still remains the same. You know, they're still that way by no doing of their own. Whether they were born that way, or whether this life was thrusted upon them in childhood, the result's still the same. As in other form is just a typical atheist something out of nothing gene worship, though. It just conveniently leaves no one culpable. With my theory, there are people that can be held accountable. Every tranny child is a Scooby snack that leads to a pedo's lair. And my money is on religious institutions being the biggest culprits. I know a lot of you will think that that's a jab at Catholicism, because that's who you correlate with being the abusers, but that's just because of the JM. All religions are full of child molesters, priests, rabbis, imams, monks. I know this is true from my travels. There was a huge scandal with Thai monks molesting children in a newspaper one of the times I was out there. And so that's what you tend to find where you have a super religious country. You get a lot of trannies and gays. Thailand, Philippines, Brazil, There's tons in the Middle East. The ones that haven't gone bungee jumping. the old Spartan bungee jump, and that's a perverse element in all of this, with the demonization and lack of acceptance that stems from the religions of the very institutions that created them in the first place. It's like the most intense form of victim blaming. So I just want to say that they are people, they have souls, and they deserve love and support, and their abusers should be hunted down and thrown in a wicker man. That's how we used to do it, and that's what I'd like to do, but apparently that's backwards, and I'm not a scientist, so my verdict means less. So I guess just keep doing nothing. Believe they come from nowhere, allow their abusers to get away with it, while you say they're demons and throw rocks at their heads. Let's play Pebble the Devil. Anyway, I must talk about the vaginal mind, because that is a crucial part in all of this. I will have to do like a much more comprehensive guide to what the vaginal mind is in a full episode someday, because I do talk about it a lot, but it'll probably take 10 episodes. There's so much to talk about, but I just want to rattle through some attributes of it so the wider picture of trans people and their politicisation can be seen. As I said, the vaginal mind is superficial, and this is why you'll always hear them say, how can you say they're not a woman? Look at them. Or do I look like a man? While they've made themselves into very archetypal expressions of those things on the exterior. And that's what those of us that don't have a vaginal mind see. We see the facade for what it is. But to the vaginal mind, the facade is everything. And this will explain a lot about the worldview that they have, and the world as a whole, though the worship of materialism, the painted faces, the literal two-facedness, and this manifests even in the politics. So they'll believe in anything as long as it sounds good on paper. If just on the surface it looks good, or even makes them look good, is why you have virtue signaling instead of actual virtue. Like some surface level things that they might support would be to support open borders, for example. Of course, why would we need to check where someone's from or been? We're all just people. And it's like, and that person just raped a child. Another one. Add them to the list. Think about this, that child had no rapist in their life. And then you brought in a rapist and put that rapist in that child's life. So that child only got raped because of you. You're directly responsible for the rape of that child. Yeah, but doesn't it look good on paper? Doesn't it look nice? You see, there's another point with that. The vaginal mind has no accountability. It will never take any responsibility for any wrongdoing ever. And a large part of that is because they lack both hindsight and foresight, so they live completely in the now. In that example, they don't see the continuity of them bringing in a rapist that then rapes a girl. Which is the reality of what's happening, because that wouldn't make them the good person anymore, which can never happen. But also because they see it as two separate, unrelated events. The bringing in of people without discrimination is still beautiful and righteous and loving, and the raping of the little girl is a terrible, unfortunate, and unavoidable mystery. And also, if there's a point out that the two events are in fact related, which they are, they'll turn on you and they'll start saying that in fact you're the bad guy. You're just trying to divide people. Hey, let's take away everyone's weapons. Again, sounds good on paper. Then the tyranny and genocide comes, of which they didn't foresee. The lack of hindsight makes them have a complete disdain for history too, so they only ever change it or destroy it. And after it's all done, there'll be no accountability again. It will always be someone else's fault. Also, the blatant tokenism in politics is an aspect of this superficial vaginal mind too. Like, look, we've got one of each colour. Are we super happy and peaceful now? It's like we just destroyed the entire meritocracy or anything. So some of the key features of the vaginal mind are that it's pathologically altruistic. If someone's ever presented as being in danger, you can be sure the vaginal mind is going to come to the rescue. And everything I'm telling you about the vaginal mind right now, the elites already know. Literally all politics and propaganda is around the manipulation of the vaginal mind and your ignorance of its existence. But that's a big one. Their pathological altruism, the puppeteering of their heartstrings by the not-so-hidden hands. But the important thing about that is that the thing they've latched onto to help must always be seen as completely defenceless and incapable of helping themselves. This is why the vaginal mind is so targeted in politics, because they make the best useful idiots. And I'm not saying that to be rude. It's the actual term, it's what's called useful idiots, by political pawns. Because whatever poor oppressed pup they decide to defend and take home can never fix the problem by themselves. They can never solve something or cultivate whatever's lacking from within. The solution every single time is that society must change to accommodate them. Which, as the vaginal mind is collectivist, is almost always involving the stripping away of individual rights. Of course, the vaginal mind is censorious. It's paranoid. It lacks logic. And the paranoia and the lack of logic go hand in hand, I think, because there's a pattern I've recognised where they'll often say, don't say that, otherwise they're gonna die. Just the most extreme conclusion every single time. Because that way there's no need to argue based upon the evidence presented. No. Do everything I say, or someone's gonna die. Stop saying those words, otherwise someone's gonna die. Really, every single time. It's funny how whatever you believe, if someone merely disagrees, death is on the table. They're terrorists. All terrorism sprouts from the vaginal mind. The vaginal mind is entitled and also anti-nature. Who said we gotta have kids just because we're gay? Nature sounds like a fucking bigot to me. Where did he live? I'll get him fired from the job. You know, you can be sure that nature will never be seen as too great of an obstacle to overcome in order to warp the world in their image. And all body modifications are symptomatic of the vaginal mind too. I've said this several times before, whether it's mutilated penises, tattoos, alien-hued hair, plastic surgery, it's all a rebellion against nature. And the vaginal mind also self-sabotages. That's why all these modifications they have are fucking dreadful. Any desirable partner will always prefer them to look natural, and yet they'll cut off parts and inject things and all kinds of wackiness. And you can almost guarantee these self-saboteurs will be killing themselves in some way with their cosmetics now. Because you can go to any period of time and find the same. Ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, the Rococo period. There's always a deadly ingredient that they're smothering themselves with. I have absolutely no fucking doubt that they'll be doing the same thing right now. Because it's in their nature. They self-sabotage. And this is, of course, expressed through the politics too, where there'll be allegiances made that just make no fucking sense. Like radical feminists with radical Islam. Just simping away. In one part, because they've been told it makes them look nice. And, of course, the facade of niceness is paramount, no matter the consequence. But ultimately, it's just self-sabotage. You know, you think everything you believe in isn't just going to be undone the second your new partner in crime gets a sniff of power. And so it's the same with trannies. As I said, that's just a brief on a handful of the wondrous ways of the vag mind. But I told you all of that to elucidate the answers to the inevitable questions that arise. Like, why is it being pushed? And well, this is the reason, the self-sabotage of the vaginal mind. This is what it all comes down to, just another allegiance that was doomed to failure since the outset, despite the many warnings. I remember people would say, if they're women, does that mean a lesbian's going to have to suck their cock? And they'll go, that's never going to be a problem. You just want to divide us. You know, that old chestnut. And then fast forward to today, and that's literally a real problem. Lesbians being completely ostracised because they refuse to suck a dick. Also, remember when we also know, what about women's sports? Do you want a biological man to punch a woman in the face or just dominate all of the sports? And they'll say, that's never going to happen anyway. Girls are just as strong as boys. And then they'd call you alt-right. Well, again, fast forward to today. Broken record after broken record after broken record, and of course there's no hindsight or humility, so there's never going to be an apology, but this was only like 8 years ago. But you see, now the Overton window's shifted, and the people that I see fighting against trans shit now are women more than anyone else, the so-called TERFs. You know, even though it's a bed of their own making, suddenly they're outraged to see the fruits of their altruism dangle beside them in the changing room. And it will be the same with whatever else they support. The disaster will become too prevalent to ignore, and they'll go, where are the men? Why aren't the men speaking about this? Well, they're all in prison for hate speech. That's what you said they were doing when they tried to warn you. Because in their universe, someone that merely disagrees with them is hateful, or even someone that makes a joke. So that's why it's pushed from the ground level. For the elites, I think it primarily comes down to depopulation. You know, because pregnancy isn't possible with the whole ball situation, which I've pointed out before. If you want frivolous sex, and our society has championed that and told you that the aesthetic is all that matters, the superficial appearance and just busting a nut, there isn't a great reason not to fuck trannies. However, if you want children, you're gonna need the real thing. Also, that's another aspect of the self-sabotage, the fact that they're in competition for sexual partners and have now encouraged a viable alternative to themselves as a partner. So there's more options for men to choose from, and also less men on the market. It's the same with their advocacy for gays also. So the men fucking them won't procreate, and the trans will literally chemically castrate themselves. You know, so yes, it comes down to depopulation. Another reason is a monetary one, because for every trans person, you have a lifetime consumer for Big Pharma and a permanent dependency on the state, on the regime. You've got to super care about that because the other guys might get into power and be meaner to you. You don't want that. You better turn up and vote for me, Mr. Eunuch, because I care about you. And another peripheral element, I think, is just seeing how far they can push the PSYOP. Demoralisation, just pushing the boundaries of how much people are willing to put up with. Something for as long as the crowd around them will say nothing about it. Then just the general use of all the other useful idiots, which is a change society to encourage and normalise censorship, etc. Another question that rises is why is it important to talk about? You know, who cares? Or we can all just live and let live. But of course, people are compelled to talk about it when we live in a time where if you're in a liberal city, you may well lose your job just for saying that there are two genders. That good old vaginal censorship at work. And when the entire notion of objective truth is tossed out of the window in order not to hurt someone's feelings, which would be a fundamental change to all of Western civilization, and well, frankly, isn't tenable. It would lead to the destruction of civilization. Zero great civilizations have been born out of this outlook of not valuing truth and philosophy, but instead catering to hurt feelings and lunacy. So it shouldn't be anyone's issue, except you're demanding that people participate in the delusion. So it isn't about someone else's life, it's about our own lives and how we navigate our interactions with those people that need support and compassion without contorting society and its very fabric in the process. So the ultimate question is fundamentally, at what point do you draw the line at abetting somebody's dysphoria? That's the ultimate question, and it's different for different people. Some people draw the line at hello, at the pronouns. Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh are like this. They're just like, no, you're not a she, you're a he. You're a man, and I'm not going to lie about it. Which I understand the reasoning behind it, because they claim that the whole thing is a slippery slope, so you can't abet any of it. You have to have absolute integrity over objective truth, which I am fine with ultimately also, and I don't think it does any great harm to the tranny, despite what the vaginal advocates would say, oh no, they're poor and utterly helpless and will all melt and die if you merely use the wrong pronoun. That's not true. Again, when you know the vaginal mind says this for everything they support, you'll realise it isn't true for any of them. They'll just be a little peeved, a tad disgruntled, but they're not going to end their life. However, I personally am I'm happy to use someone's preferred name because I just don't give a fuck. Because I just don't give a fuck. And I have a level of sensitivity to the situation. I think they're behaving in an autistic way. Like Ben Shapiro and the Matt Walsh types of the world. They're also probably in part motivated by the fact that religion does say, throw rocks at their heads also. Because if a child came to you with a picture and said, do you like the look of my giraffe? But it looks nothing like a giraffe. I don't feel like society will crumble if you just lie and say yes for something so small, when you know the alternative, harsh honesty, is really going to just achieve nothing but hurt feelings, which again ultimately can't take precedence over truth in the long term. But do you think any trans people will hear Ben Shapiro call them a man and then a light bulb will suddenly click and go, oh, I'm cured now? No, it achieves nothing. So in my personal life, if a trans person approached me and asked me to call them something, I'd oblige them. But if a schizophrenic approached me and asked me to call him a Napoleon, I'd probably do the same. Because I just weigh up the situation in the moment and evaluate the pros and cons. It isn't something I was caring for about one way or the other. I don't mind obliging, but I also don't care if someone doesn't. Think of it like this. Imagine if you were in a room with Kanye West and you said Kanye West instead of Ye. And then he got offended that you dead named him. Would you be asked? And also, if Ben Shapiro is in the presence of Kanye West, do you think he's not going to call him whatever the fuck he asks to be called? Mr. West? That's Master West to you, boy. And perhaps I'm the inverse of some people in society, because this podcast is broadcast to the public, so my only prerogative is to tell the truth, to not kowtow to any social pressure whatsoever, as this may well be heard by future generations long after I'm dead. So I feel like I have a duty to be honest on all matters and value truth and logic above all else. So any listener can respect that about me and this podcast as a whole. We'll have a reputation of being fearless and free thinking when it comes to philosophizing on anything. But then in my personal life, either out of politeness, not wanting to be stabbed, or not wanting to form a friendship, so it means nothing anyway, then I would oblige anyone's delusion. Whereas there are people in society that will write on the internet about how woke they are, and then whisper and bitch about the tranny stuff in secret. Many such cases. The line for some people is the use of a bathroom or prison. That's been the undoing of some politicians in recent times. Other people draw the line with children, which is funny because we live in a very Americanized society right now. So I'll often hear clips of Americans shouting, they're mutilating our children. And my ears prick up every single time. And I think, oh, finally, they've finally woken up to circumcision. It's about time they abolish that fucking barbarism. And then after about 10 seconds, I realised, they're just talking about tranny kids again. and never mind, because one kind of mutilation is bad, but the other is good. They both look the same to me. But of course, I ultimately, do agree with all of those boundaries. And I don't think society has to cater in any way whatsoever beyond being polite in interpersonal interactions and showing compassion where it's needed. It shouldn't be politicised in any way whatsoever. We don't have to buy into the dysmorphia as a society and how to live through the kind of clown world events we've endured in the last few years, because the level of dysmorphia is not the same across the board, and most will live happy existences with just an individual's politeness that they come into contact with in their own little bubble, being fully aware of the biological realities. And this is the situation in most countries of the world. And the ones that are fully convinced would feel that way regardless of the changes you make. Every single person could call them a man and they'll still say they're a woman. It would make a difference. And I should say, I'm also completely sceptical of the so-called cure by itself. Because the transition is seen as a panacea cure. Whatever the problem is, it's either a result of you not having enough pills or surgeries, or society has to be torn down to accommodate you. And along the way, I suspect that many other mental illnesses are completely neglected. And then after everything's been ticked off the list, there's nothing more to do anymore. And I don't really... I really don't know if this so-called treatment has ever worked in any way whatsoever, because the data's super sketchy. I had a little ogle into it, and it's weird because the participants in the studies just disappear, and it's kind of left to your imagination to interpret that as you please. Like maybe they just didn't follow up, or maybe after they got the final surgery, they just fucking Epstein their assholes. Fucking shot the balloon knot. And of course, the many cases of those that have detransitioned, which are never shown in mainstream media, those that transitioned and later regretted it and so reverted. There are a lot of activist doctors pushing this onto children, which is kind of another ridiculous element of democracy, because you force everyone to be political. So then, so when you see these radical rallies and advocating for trans kids and paedophilia and whatever else, these are all people that have jobs in society. There's absolutely nothing that stops them from any of these people from becoming police or teachers or doctors, and people don't see any problem with that. I would be the weird one for suggesting political people shouldn't be able to enter certain professions. And then everyone's just baffled as to why the police and teachers and doctors are all influencing the kids in major ways. Just using their positions to carry out their political agendas. And of course the doctors use the same vaginal shithousery on the parents. Well, if you don't put them on medication, they'll kill themselves. You don't want that, do you? If you don't let us cut off her tits, she'll end up dead. You don't want your daughter's blood on your hands, do you? This is why the parents acquiesce. And this is especially scandalous when you factor in another feature of the vaginal mind I'm sure I mentioned before, which is that they also suffer from chronic FOMO. That's why they have a penchant for fashion, and why a fashion trend is a thing, and why all fashion trends are fleeting. So literally whatever they're shown on television or on a magazine and told, hey, this is the cool thing now, literally millions will just instantaneously go along with it. I wish it wasn't that retarded, but it really is. So that's why there was a crazy increase in my country, like over the past few years, of girls transitioning, meaning getting the tits cut off. It was like a 5,000% increase or something, man. And that increase, it coincided with the media exposure to all of this, and then there's the Tavistock Institute with like 1,000 cases pending against them right now. Anyway, I'm against surgery, full stop. We're talking about the slippery slopes and how some people say it's pronouns and people think it starts with gay people. I'm of the opinion that the so-called slippery slope starts with plastic surgery because, again, I think it's ultimately a natural thing to be trans, a natural reaction to abnormal situations. So let's say there's a nuclear apocalypse and we start over in a jungle without any hormones or plastic surgeons. I'm sure they'll still attempt to imitate a woman in some fashion, wearing like a grass skirt or whatever, but it wouldn't be convincing. Which should also be the priority for all trans people in the world right now, to prevent a war. Because the second there's a war, the supplies that maintain your facades will absolutely not be taken priority. Particularly when people are rationing, particularly when supplies are bombed. Of course, the other slippery slope was feminists completely devaluing motherhood, reducing women to sassy sex dolls. And, one of the first sex change surgeries involved a uterus implant, actually. It was done on someone by the name of Lily Elba. But, of course, the body rejected it and they died 3 months later. But they weren't the first to have a so-called sex change surgery. That title belongs to someone called Dora Richter. Both of those were under the watch of a Jewish man by the name of Magnus Hirschfeld, who headed the Institute for Sexual Wissenschaft, or Institute of Sex Research, in Weimar, Germany. And then all of a sudden, a little band of ragamuffins known as the Nazis grew in popularity. And it was the books of Magnus Hirschfeld that was seized and burned during the infamous book burnings. People always say to learn the mistakes of history so you won't be doomed to repeat them. It would be helpful if our history books contained them. It might be useful in these times to kind of know the prelude to that. But anyway, my disapproval for surgery isn't just based upon there seeming to be a lack of evidence for supposed effectiveness on the mental well-being of a trans person. There's two other reasons. The first is that I did my due diligence and joined a trans dating site. As previously mentioned, I am a top-notch journalist, and so I began asking questions of both trannies and men on there. Well, firstly, there were some interesting discoveries because I'd asked them all if they thought they were women or not. And sometimes I'd get an answer that was super aggressive, like, of course I'm a woman. And it was just baffling because it was like, this is a trans dating site. You know who isn't on here? Women. There's 0 women on this side. You must have fucking typed in the website knowing full well why you're here and not on the same site as all of the other actual women. I kind of bet the dysphoria out of politeness to a degree, but it really did stand out as being particularly retarded in this context. Another interesting thing was that was frequently said by the trans on there was that they don't want to be viewed as someone's pornographic fantasy, which, fair enough, we're all human and would want to be treated as more than just a sex object, unless you're Greta Thunberg, the fucking eco-sleuth. Rumour has it she uses a broccoli for a dildo, but as I say, we are all human. We want to be treated as more than a sex object. But also, what percentage of men that are willing to fuck a tranny have got to that point after watching she-male porn? Because I'm willing to say it's at least 99%. Is that fair to say? And what I found out was that when I asked them about having a bottom surgery, they'd almost always reply to me saying, whatever my partner wants. Like, it wasn't really a huge deal. You'd get one or two that would be adamant, and they'll do it irregardless of what the future partner may prefer. Again, the vaginal entitlement we spoke about before. But the vast majority didn't seem to have any independent thought on the matter. They just wanted to be loved, and would only do that if that's what their future partner wanted. But then if their partner wanted them to keep it, they'd keep it. It was all just based on love. And then, of course, you had many others that were completely confident and content with keeping the penis, and that seemed to have very little dysmorphia, and that were completely disgusted by the thought of removing it. To be honest, I found those ones to be the sanest of all, the most intelligent, the most stable. And then when I spoke to the men, I found that pretty unsurprisingly, none of them were seeking a post-op trans girlfriend. Because again, they could just search on a site with actual women if they were looking for what they claim to possess. Not only were ones with penises considered more desirable, the ones that were top and versatile were the most prized, and also ones with functioning penises that hadn't been completely deflated by hormones. So basically, outside of breast implants, the changes trannies are making to their bodies aren't even desirable to those that are in the dating market for them. And so, irregardless of the supposed benefits of cutting off your cock and balls, I'm still against it, because I'm absolutely sure it must lead to a lower quality of life eventually, because the dating pool you're a part of is so infinitesimally small. And I'm sure there are so there's so many that are only doing it because they're convinced that it's their penis which is the hindrance from them finding love. And the thing is, from that point, everything's irreversible. When you consider the detransition, it seems preposterous to me. You wouldn't have much more hesitance on the matter. To be honest, I don't even trust fucking hormones much either. There's no long-term data on what those effects are going to be, but there's all kinds of problems I've heard about. Organ failure, trans men pissing blood. But let's say you only got a breast surgery. You could live a pretty comfortable life as a gay man if you detransition someday. What you're reducing yourself to is an orgasmless eunuch that can only attract the dregs of society. By those realities alone, whatever positive effects it's claimed to have must surely be nullified by the decrease in the life quality, as well as the final scapegoat for the happiness being ticked off. But the second reason for being against it is that it's not a fucking pussy. I mean, it's not even close to being a pussy. I grew up hearing the word sex change and just assumed that's what was happening. They turn a penis into a vagina like magic. That's absolutely not what happens. I won't go into the specific details of it all. I'm sure any trans listeners will know already, but your body will basically consider your pussy to be a wound and try and close it up. So you must insert a dildo for weeks at a time in order to keep it open in an act called dilation. Often pubes grow on the inside of the mangina. Yummy. Honestly, it's baffling the level of bullshit doctors can get away with throughout history. Like the Roman doctors prescribing lizards' heads for curing STDs. They made a living out of that. But this is no less ridiculous. We live in an age of abstract surgeons. I'll just make an incision here and tug on this here. Turn this inside out, back to front, and voila! Oh, what on earth is that? It's a pussy. A pussy? It looks nothing like a pussy. Come on, squint your eyes a little bit. Here, drink some absinthe. And what's
What's that monstrosity? Ah, that's the Frankenlip. The Frankenlip? But it's hideous. It's labia. Doesn't look like any labia I've ever come across. Well, you know, the pubes will cover it up anyway. Pubes? What kind of pubes could cover that mess up? Well, Fu Manchu, of course.
It will never be a pussy, so there's no point in even trying. You may as well just have a go-go gadget pussy instead. Upgrade. Have it be airtight, you know, a fucking memory foam mangina. And then 1,000 tongues to caress the shaft like a car wash. A hand that comes out and tickles the balls. An owly spray of jasmine to keep it fresh. Doubles as a USB port to charge an iPad. We got a rocket launcher. Trans men have somewhat the right idea. I know we haven't focused much on them, but I saw a documentary on them once, and what they have are some cute balls, some little cute balls, and when you squeeze them, it causes their appendage to become erect. It was honestly quite a nifty design. I still don't approve though, of course. And when I say appendage, well, that's because it's usually grafted out of their fucking arm or leg. It's wild. And this brings me full circle to what I was saying before about the vaginal mind. This is the only reason this nonsense persists, because saying nothing about it sounds nice on paper, and therefore saying anything else sounds mean. But in actuality, the surgeries aren't helping. Their bodies are being cut up and severed in irreparable ways. And their quality of life is going to drastically decrease because they're convinced by your silence and abetting that you actually wouldn't discriminate against them in the dating world. Which you absolutely will. I know 0 men that would be willing to fuck an axe wound. And I know scumbags. And there are 0 thoughts on Tinder boasting about their deep thigh-in technique in their bio. No girls are saying they give a mean deep thigh. So that's my ultimate verdict. I think that if you're not willing to be with a trans person that will want to be with you after having surgeries, you have no right to advocate for them having surgeries in the first place. It's high time you went hunting for some armadillos to curl up in your pillows. Talks cheap, ladies. Let's see that famed tolerance of yours in action. I hope you're peckish, because there's a long line of arm that needs sucking. Now get to squeezing.
Though I'm not great at introductions, while the pendulum swings slow, I will swallow my reluctance. And so, here I go, here I go, here I go, here I go, here I go. What's your name, what's your number? Together we can conquer this rock. If I put 2 fucking fingers inside of your pussy and 2 in your eyes, they'd call it the Spock. I would have the whole wide world safe in my hands while the rough seas tremble below. We could live long and prosper, baby, with my fucking hello. And then your eyes would say, I hope it was a greater pleasure knowing me as it will be knowing you.
Now the time has come to listen to the madness of the masses. If you'd ever like to contribute to this part of the podcast in future episodes, inject some hormones into your hormones, convert your lols into full-blown keks, turn those mammaries into pecs, cut off your cock, use the hole as a holster for some Blackpool rock, stick it in my ass, my good mate supplied a wood for a caliphate, where each and every apostate shall shit shit out their own prostate. Wibble wobble, miscrabobble, deli belly incubate, releasing growls and bowels and vowels on your slut of a coal-burning gran. To pablo@gmail.com, and of course follow me across all social media at Pab the Crab. I'm going to be completely straightforward with y'all and say this may well be the shortest segment of this podcast we've ever done, because we didn't get a lot of questions or answers to my questions for this episode, which is kind of funny to me because I don't really have too great of an expectation, you know, in these early days for the kind of responses. You know, some weeks like a topic will stick, others people, you know, it won't. But for this one, I was like, oh, people are for sure gonna you know, have such divergent opinions on this, because, you know, I've got some trans people who follow me. I've got like some TERFs. So I think there's going to be some spicy debates happening. You know, this podcast is the safe space for freedom of speech. So that's what this segment's all about. You know, you have absolute anonymity. I'll give you a platform, a voice. I thought it's gonna, you know, you're not gonna. It's a hot topic. Everyone's gonna say something about it, but fucking nothing. And no one really cares about it. Or, you know, although I think another part of it's just with the timing of it being the transition period for us. So, you know, perhaps in the future I'll do another trans episode where, you know, because also I've got other kind of anecdotes and yeah, there's like, yeah, we could maybe like get a trans guest on or something like that. I don't know, you know, there's some ideas floating around for that. Maybe to do a future one, but as I say, no real responses. But yeah, we're just going to have to persevere with what we got. So, what is your favourite TV show? Well, as we established last time, I don't really do favourites. You know, I'm a pretty indecisive fellow. But I'd say, yeah, maybe Game of Thrones. But saying that, I haven't finished it. I haven't finished watching it, but I'm also psychic, so I do know what happens. You know, I predicted what's going on with the old ice hoe on the dragon, and yeah, I kind of called it. It's one of those shows where everyone was going like, oh, you know, you would love this, oh, you would love this, and you know, because everyone likes it. And then, you know, I kind of put it off for so many years because, like, oh, if everyone likes it, it's probably dog shit. But no, actually, yeah, I think it probably is the best thing I've seen from television. And Impractical Jokers I quite like. But again, I haven't seen that for years. So my two favourites of things that, you know, I don't really, I haven't finished watching or haven't seen for years. Oh, you know what I like actually? Say I don't watch much TV, but this is something on Amazon Prime. It's probably my favourite show, you know, currently. It's a show called Documental. I couldn't recommend this highly enough. It's a Japanese show on Amazon Prime, and I think it's maybe like 10 people, and they're all comedians. They have to like chip in an amount of money. And then they get locked in a room for 6 hours, and it's basically the last one to laugh wins all of the money. But it'll be like a yellow card, an orange card, right? You know, there's a bit of like warnings involved in it. And it's the fucking best show on the planet. I love it so much because it's kind of a social experiment. You get a lot of different comedic styles that are paired with each other. And it's hosted by a man called Hitoshi Matsumoto, and he's kind of like a Japanese comedic legend, but he's kind of a comedic connoisseur, and so like he kind of like, you know, philosophizes on what it was that made them laugh in each moment and stuff. It works really well. I think they tried to like remakes of this show in like Mexico and Australia. I think maybe it's called like Last Laugh Standing, but it, to be honest, it's pretty shit because the elements that they remove from it is like the philosopher comedian which they replace that with just like a random celebrity, and then it's never the comedian's own money, which also takes a bit of the pressure and it removes the high stakes, and then also obviously the fucking diversity quotas, which we won't get into, but of course gotta go. So yeah, none of them are as good as the Japanese one. But what I will say with it is don't begin with the first season, because they change the rules every season, and in the first season they just didn't really figure out the game yet. So I started with season 2, and then when I fell in love with it, I'd go back and watch season 1. But basically, there's no winner. Like they hadn't, because they kind of like they would all hide from each other to just avoid laughing, and then in the end, there's just a bunch of people left because everyone's been avoiding each other. But they changed the rules where if you make someone laugh, you end up getting points for making them laugh. This kind of addition, and then so it changes season to season. So I think in the next season they'll make a change. So like if you get eliminated, there'll be a period at the end of the time. There'll be like a little period at the end of the game that goes zombie time, and then you can come back as a zombie, and if you make the remaining contestants laugh, you win your money back. So there's these kind of like additions that are added season to season, but I say it's on Amazon, and they're pretty slow to change the to add the subtitles, the English subtitles. But I think they've done maybe like 10 or 11 seasons in Japan. It's just kind of work. They're just slow to translate them on Prime. But I don't know if you're Hitoshi Matsumoto listening to this, which you may well be. I do have a couple of recommendations. Say we only have like 5 seasons or so in this country, but I am a Time Lord, so I would say Tomochika, that woman. I think she deserves another chance. I like Thomas Chica in one of the later seasons, and also I think it's maybe a bit harsh to give them a card for smiling. I think it should be a full laugh, and you'll get more jokes and more high level laughs that way. So yeah, that's my recommendations for the show itself to Mr. Matsumoto, and yeah, that's my highest recommendation to y'all is documental. Get on it. I say start from season 2, but yeah, that's a phenomenal show. Guten Tag, Kaiser. Would you rather walk in on your dad fucking a dog, or walk in on your dad being fucked by a dog? What a sordid question, but I like it. More would you rather questions in the future, please. This is prime YouTube content. Rather see him fuck a dog easily. Easily. I mean, neither are what the paragon of a patriarch looks like, but if he fucks it, you could still look him in the eyes and see a man. It's just a cold, heartless, psychopathic man. Especially if he fucks a pit bull. That'll definitely be manly. He would still retain some manliness if he's the one fucking it. Unless he's kissing it while he does it, tickling its chin and smiling. But I imagine it being done with aggression, just raping it remorselessly. That's what I picture. Don't know if you're picturing the same. And look, I don't want to kink shame, but you've got to have pretty low self-esteem to get fucked by a dog. I mean, you've given up your right to be considered a human right there. Ugh. Imagine just seeing him look up at you with a little bone in his mouth. You're taken to the vet to be put down immediately. I know it's 2023. I don't want to get cancelled for saying that, but look, I'm against interspecies relationships, and I don't think it's a wise idea to put a dog's dick inside of your human ass. I'm pretty sure that's biblical. Thou shan't canoodle with thy poodle. Haven't you ever read the Talmud? top or bottom? Well, you've reminded me of the TV show Bottom. Perhaps that's my favourite TV show, actually. Because this is one of my favourite shows when I was a kid, but I actually watched it as an adult, and it's even better. That doesn't often happen. Where you can see something and you'll be laughing your ass off as a kid, but then you see it as an adult, and there's actually so much wit and like references you wouldn't get and stuff. This is it's a comedy show from my country, starring Rick Mail and Aid Edmondson, and so that's so I am a fan of that Bottom, but in a sexual set, it just wouldn't make as much sense though. So I'm fully trained for the top experience. To put all my hours into mastering that skill. So I think it's pretty obvious that would be the better one to choose. I'd put a ball in my ass though. Anyway, we get a video sent in, a little short vid this week. Well, I hope that brightened up your day. I'll shoot off now because Abdi's giving me elocution lessons. He gets real irate if I'm not punctual. Starts cursing at me in Latin. It has been a blessing to have you enter my kingdom. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and thank you to all that contributed and that support the podcast in other ways. I want you to make your father proud this week. Count around for me.
1, 7.
That's it. It doesn't need to make sense. Just keep counting around and around and around. Who told you that time must be linear? It doesn't matter that it sounds strange or that you've never thought in this way before. All of the numbers that you thought were going to be reached will still be reached. We are just finding a new way to reach our destination, and we will reach places you could only imagine in your wildest dreams.
100.
Your brain may try and find a pattern in the numbers I am saying, and that's completely natural. Your brain was designed to see patterns and to figure it out. As long as you feel relaxed, it is all okay. Just feel your body relax with every thought that wanders while I speak to your subconscious. I want you to think back to the time before you were the butterfly you are now, to the times in your life where you were a slave to your impulses, where your body didn't feel capable of inspiring envy and you just dragged yourself through the day without a real direction or purpose. Until one day, everything changed. The way you felt about yourself changed. The way you felt about the world changed. And within yourself arose the primordial wisdom that had been lying dormant in you your entire life without you knowing.
You can be whatever you want to be.
Remember how you felt the first time you heard those words. Feel the ecstasy of revelation coursing through your veins as you relive that moment. Think about how wonderful it is that you have the power to change from day to day. You don't even have any obligation to be the person you were 5 minutes ago.
6.
Think 5 moons back, snug in your cocoon, hidden from the eyes of the world, and how the time passed while you were deep in meditation. Think of all the improvements you knew you needed to make to yourself before you decided to take action and change your life for the better. Remember the dream you had when the grasshopper visited you in your chrysalis form. Remember what that grasshopper told you. The alchemist John Dee once possessed a mirror made of obsidian, which was said to be used to communicate with another world. The same mirror was used by the Aztecs to communicate with their Aztec god Tezcatlipoca. In what ways will you communicate with yourself? What Enochian language will summon your inner strength? What alchemical changes must happen within? You must figure out the formula, and you will. You were designed for greatness, even if the world can't see you now. And you thank the grasshopper before opening your eyes to a new world that had completely changed. And now people see you for what you are. Lepidopterists marvel at your beauty, and your wings evade their nets with elegance as they can only dream to get a closer look. There are more than 86,000 seconds every day, and each second is an opportunity to be amazed by the beautiful complexity of existence. Be thankful for where you came from. Every event in your life shaped who you are, and what you were, and what you will become. The time for change has come. Harness your power within. Moontime listeners, sow the seeds of noble deeds across a field once plagued by weeds. Sunshine spectators, cultivate virtue with fervent zeal for the betterment of the commonweal. You have my love and support. All you must do is sleepwalk toward your destiny. You'll return here next week 1,000 steps closer to it. Playing us out this week is the ever-elusive Wharf Speed. It's the second time they've been featured on the pod, and the song is called I Ain't the Eggman, Prophet, nor Fiend. Do keep sending in your own tunes if you would like to be featured on the pod. Like, share, subscribe, yank the bell in so you don't miss next week's sermon. Follow me across social media at Pab the Crab. We are the algorithm. Buy a fucking book. Educate yourself and know that the time for peace is upon us.
Dr. Timothy Leary has been described as being either a prophet or a fiend.